Breaking, mixed verdict reached in Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial. Defense took a big L on the RICO stuff. Let's take a look.
Are getting the verdict coming in right now. This is coming in real time, and we have count one here. This is the racketeering charge. We have the count here of not guilty on racketeering. This is coming in real time. We have count two also coming in here, not guilty. That is the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. Count three, we have guilty. Count three is guilty for the transportation of Cassie Ventura. That is guilty. Count four, this is the sex trafficking of Jane. That's a pseudonym. Not guilty. Count five, we have guilty. That is 5 counts. We have a mixed verdict here.
Is this the OJ situation again? No, dude. No, this is not the OJ situation. This is a dramatically different situation than the OJ one. First of all, there is no like prevailing narrative in the environment.
The freak-offs were not connected to some of this violence, that there was not that force, fraud, or coercion element. That is by far, from a penalty perspective, the most serious. It carried a 15-year minimum. So that is a huge distinction. This is the best case scenario, in my view, for the defense. A lot of us opined yesterday that when the jury asked for a readback of Cassie Ventura and Daniel Phillips, one of the escorts' testimony, that read perhaps negatively for the defense. The jury was digging in to see if there was that force, fraud, or coercion. Clearly, it went the other way.
For the racketeering, you really did need to find a pattern of behavior. You needed to find a criminal enterprise that he engaged in with other people, right? When people think of racketeering, they think of the mob. They think of running drugs. They think of running guns. Now,
I mean, they also think of rappers as well, considering that this is what they tried to do to Young Thug too.
Federal prosecutors have used a far more expansive view of racketeering, especially in recent years in SDNY, right? Because they want to bring in all of the worst evidence. They want to stretch back the material decades ago. And so you've talked about how it allows them to tell a full story. Well, it turns out doing that in this case did not fulfill what the prosecutors had hoped. Despite having that video, right, Misty? We talked about that video being so damning for him, where you see him on tape pulling Cassie Ventura by the hair. You see him stomping on her. The jury heard evidence that he actually paid money to a security guard to bury that video. Paid him.
Wait, is this Hun pro Diddy? No, what would I be pro Diddy, dude? What the hell? Like, I guess maybe the misogyny tourists, they'll probably reach out and be like, oh yeah. Even then, the fact that he's like bisexual kind of cuts off a big chunk of the people that would be like pro Diddy in general. The only person I know who's pro Diddy is the president, you know? The manosphere guys, even before we all found out like the extent of the cruelty, the extent of like the insanity, a lot of people were immediately attacking Diddy because like before we found out the very clear disregard for human safety, they were already like, oh, he's gay. Like that was, it felt like that was almost seen as like a bigger crime than the actual harm that he was doing to like women and men. DJ Academics, maybe DJ Academics is pro Diddy. I could see that. How do you explain he got almost scot-free? I think the prosecutors fucked up, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they overextended with the RICO stuff. I mean, he clearly has a lot of money and had a fantastic defense team. I'm surprised. I'm just as surprised as you are. But then again, I wasn't paying super close attention, so maybe I might have missed something. You know what I mean?
And yet it wasn't enough.
It was not enough. So
he's on video dragging a woman back to the hotel room. Yeah, except the problem with stuff like that is, number one, the criminal justice system very clearly doesn't successfully prosecute people often. People that harm women often, even if it's on camera. Number two, I think that there is a difference in the charges potentially, as opposed to like simple domestic abuse or domestic violence. Like that's a much easier thing to get across, especially because it happened on camera. But this is not about that. This is a case that is much broader than simply what he was caught doing on camera. Yeah, they couldn't prove a connection between the on-tape violence and the sex trafficking.
What needed to happen was that the jury believes that the commercial sex acts, so those freak-offs, that Cassie Ventura engaged in them because of that violence, because of the force that Combs was exerting, because of extortion about releasing these
Yeah, prosecution was not, I guess, able to convincingly explain that extortion and the violence played a formative role. And they literally hit again, this is why I said misogyny plays a role in this. They hit no, she was actually enjoying it and she was actually asking for it defense. It's, I guess, a very hard argument to make to begin with. In the simplest terms, that's what it is. They were able to at least convince enough members of the jury that there was reasonable doubt that the victims were involved in this in a way where they were consenting to it rather than being extorted. Are we going to see Tory Lanez as defenders? Yes, but the manosphere, I think, is like of two different minds here, because on the one hand, the manosphere loves when like men who get accused of sexual deviancy, sexual assault, sexual harassment get off, and they will join in on the pylon regardless. But also, a lot of those dudes are homophobic. So Diddy being bisexual puts a little bit of a stopgap on it, because they've been using, that's the reason why people have been using like, oh, no Diddy or Diddy freak offs as like as a way to say like no homo, as a way to point to like queer behavior in general. So while they hate women enough to like kind of use this as a celebration, I think it would give a lot of people pause to fully come on board, especially because like Diddy's reputation has been permanently tarnished as a direct consequence of, you know, being out and about openly bisexual.
During the course of this case from
So
prosecutors
who knows,
hasn't really defined what it is or its purpose. And the answer is it's that. It's either they didn't believe there was a conspiracy or the enterprise existed. And I say that because the Mann Act, these two charges.
Like if he was just straight and also a, you know, mass or whatever, they would totally defend him, I think. The text did a lot of heavy lifting. The defense used them to make it seem like she was into it, because you can't necessarily read emotions through text. New York Times did an article on them and shows the text here. A jury began deliberation on Monday over the fate of Sean Diddy Combs, who was facing charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. The jury will have access to hundreds, if not thousands of pages of evidence presented during the trial, including a year's worth of text messages that chronicle Combs' relationship with the two women at the center of the case. The trove of text the jurors have seen provided intimate glimpses into the dynamics of the two tumultuous relationships. The first with Cassandra Ventura, the singer known as Cassie. The second with a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Swipe to read the selection of messages the prosecution and defense have used in court to make their case. The words sent between Sean Diddy Combs and his girlfriends have been cited as crucial evidence by both sides of the case that hinges on whether sex marathons he directed were coercive. When do you want to freak off? Lol. Lol, I'm just going up to change and put my ring in. I just picked it up. I'm always ready to freak off. Lol, lol. You tell me the day you choose. It can be whenever? Question mark, says Cassie. Diddy says, name the night. The defense referred to this August 5th, 2009 exchange to try and convince jurors that Cassandra Ventura, the singer known as Cassie, was a willing participant in the freak-offs. In 2016, Sean Combs says, call me, the cops are here. You gonna abandon me all alone? Call me, please. Cassie says, I have a premiere Monday for the biggest thing I've ever done in my life. I have a black eye and a fat lip. It was time for me to go. You are sick for thinking it's okay to do what you've done. Please stay far away from me. 2016. Call me. Help. I'm about to be arrested, says Diddy. The prosecution pointed to this March 5th, 2016 exchange, which occurred after Ventura was assaulted by Combs in the hallway of a Los Angeles hotel after a freak-off as a part of his effort to manipulate her. The police never arrived at the hotel. Like, he did some demon shit, dude. He really did. He really did do some demon shit. It is kind of wild. It's not just like gross, ew, icky, oh, gay, whatever people think. Like, he was straightforwardly beating women and making them participate in these like sex parties. Like, at some point they might have actually enjoyed the sex party initially. That doesn't change the fucking dynamic, you know? There's no like, oh, you consented once, so it's over. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work that way. You don't get forever consent, which, you know, good luck explaining that to a jury that is majority men. I wish we could jog this back to when we first started dating and just getting to know each other. Ever since I opened Pandora's box, I've never been able to close it. One night of fun turned into the entirety of our relationship. And now it's all I'm expected to do and get called for. It's hurting me because I'm so much more than being loved in the dark in hotel rooms, doing things that make me feel disgusted with myself. I'm confusing your lust for me as real love. My heart is really in this and it's breaking. I don't want to play this role in your life anymore. It's dark, sleazy, and makes me feel disgusted with myself. This is September 17th from Jane, the other person that came out. My heart is really in this and is breaking. I don't want to play this role in your life anymore. It's dark, sleazy. It makes me feel disgusted with myself. I feel it's the only reason you have me around and why you pay me for the house. I don't want to feel obligated to perform these nights with you in fear of losing the roof over my head. I mean, this is literally coercion, right? I don't want to keep feeling like that anymore. I'm crying as I type this. We just need to talk like adults and figure out where we'll go from here. He says, girl, stop. Prosecutors used this September 17, 2023 exchange with a second woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane to show her increasing disinterest in hotel nights. September 24, 2023. I can't even look. It will drive me crazy. Laughed at above message, Jane laughs at. You might blow up, daddy, like a locomotive, muy caliente. In its closing argument, the defense pointed to this exchange as evidence that even shortly after an episode the government identified as a time when Jane was sex trafficked, she appeared to describe video footage of a hotel night as exciting. So they made short work. They made light work of the evidence that the prosecutors had laid out by basically hitting the classic, oh no, you don't understand, she was asking for it defense. She was the third and was subpoenaed, not voluntary as far as I know. What the defense used to discredit her is that Diddy still pays her rent and paid for her attorneys. Law tip, it's a complicated case to prove from just a logistical perspective. You need really skilled prosecutors who know what they're doing. Tons of evidence means a jury could get bored or confused easily. Typically, federal prosecutors are on top of it. Looks like they dropped the ball here and the defense capitalized. It is a shocking display, especially considering that federal cases like this are they have a 98% success rating or something. Like federal prosecution's pretty on it. It is the one group that is incredibly successful in terms of identifying exactly what they can get out of people, exactly what kind of charges they can bring up so they don't over prosecute and then end up losing. They also are pretty good. Usually they're notoriously very good. I don't know how they did that. Not if you're rich. No, even if you're rich, what do you mean? I'm about to be a criminal defense attorney, and the common notion throughout the criminal defense community is when the feds got you, they really got you. Exactly. Which is why it's like a little surprising, maybe in shitification, who knows? But even the dynamic of like misogyny being weaponized for the client here by the defense is supposed to be inconsequential considering how much evidence the prosecutors are supposed to present. Diddy's defense team was pretty goated from what I understand. And I think it was I think it's also Luigi Mangioni's defense team too. Yeah, he was Young Thug's lawyer. The Young Thug case is even harder, in my opinion, to beat than this one. Like, given the evidence that we looked at with the Young Thug one, and also on top of that, the dynamic of a black person engaging in a criminal enterprise as a rapper, that is one where the societal attitude does not favor Young Thug. It actually works against him. As opposed to Diddy, the dynamic between female victims of sexual coercion and sexual assault, that dynamic does work in favor of Diddy, as we saw. But who knows what happens with a Lil Durk too in the future. I mean, the feds clearly are no longer as, the feds clearly don't have the same motion that they once did. That's what I'm seeing. It's also true. The Young Thug case was a state case, worst prosecutors. There was a fuck ton of corruption surrounding the case that got the eventual reason for the state offering Young Thug the insane plea deal that he got. Fair. That's also true. It was super high profile in the worst possible ways. The ambitious DA also was like going after Trump. And then there was a little bit of kismet going on there as well. Cause like the DA was already under a tremendous amount of pressure from trying to do a racketeering charge against Trump, which I was very excited for. She should have just focused on that, instead of getting her boyfriend involved in some of these cases. But it is what it is. All right. That wasn't even that shitty, but that did work that did certainly work in Young Thug's favor. I saw CNN reporting people outside the courthouse pouring baby oil on each other. We are a deeply unserious society, man. It's like, even if there wasn't enough evidence, let's say, to convict someone beyond reasonable doubt that like they did racketeering or they were basically the head honcho of a criminal enterprise that was like sex trafficking women and setting up these like sex parties and extorting women to participate in them. He's still on video beating the shit out of his girlfriend. Like, he's still like a sex predator. You know what I mean? Like, what do What are you doing? Like, oh, baby oil. Like, oh, sick. I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand, like, even in the lightest version of events, like, there's still a tremendous amount of awfulness. I think people just have a fundamentally poor understanding of consent. Once the jurors saw the text of the women agreeing it's over, they don't understand coercion and manipulation. The victims are predominantly black women. This is a major factor. I think that definitely also plays a role in it as well. You got 8 men involved in it. And for younger boys, it's just a joke for them. It really bothers me how the takeaway from this case is that he's bad and gross because he's bisexual, not a sex trafficker. Gen Alpha and young Gen Z literally say no Diddy instead of no homo. I know. That's why I said, like, it's a unique predicament because, like, on the one hand, I don't think anyone's going to be like pro Diddy, but not because of the gender wars issue, because the gender wars issue demands that young men defend. The gender wars dynamic demands that young men unconditionally defend and vociferously defend Diddy. But the fact that he's also gay causes people to not do that unconditionally and vociferously, if that makes sense. Fawning can also appear as compliance to prevent harm. For example, if an individual knows their attacker will harm them physically if they fight back, they may comply in order to protect themselves. This does not mean that they consented to abuse or assault. It just means that they were trying to prevent the situation from escalating. Yeah. I think I saw recently is a cop explaining how he has to teach coercion to young men using them getting mugged as an example. Like, you have your wallet because he threatened to stab you. It was still against your will. And that's the only way he can get them to understand coercion sexually. It's actually kind of good. That's a decent way to explain that dynamic. You might even, in an effort to not, whether because you're a victim of shock and trauma in that moment, you might even try to, like, make jokes with the person who is pursuing you, right? Yeah, you might even try to, like, have a normal back and forth conversation. So to the onlooker, if that was, like, documented, they could just as easily say, well, you gave your wallet to this guy, and you joked around with him. Okay, but what you don't see is that he had a gun, you know? Yeah, you might even try and use humor to de-escalate the situation. That doesn't mean that there isn't coercion in that circumstance. There's certainly coercion in that circumstance. Consent was explored by the psychological expert that the prosecution called. Defense picked apart her credibility by showing that she only testifies for the state and is highly paid. An effective cross can heavily discredit a witness like this, especially if the witness is saying stuff about consent the jury doesn't already know, like we do. Juries are normies. Exactly. And you gotta factor in the demographic profile of the jury as well. Jury selection is a massive part of this. Obviously, that's like legal teams usually have a specific group of people dedicated to doing the perfect jury selection. And I think that this is one that heavily favored, as far as I understand, the jury as its demographic profile. The jury heavily was slanted in the direction of defense, male majority. I think in this circumstance, like, even women have the capacity to exhibit misogynistic tendencies, misogynistic opinions, as we've talked about before, because that's how patriarchy works. There are plenty of women, as we saw with, like, the Cuomo stuff. There are plenty of women who, like, automatically assume that, like, guys do this kind of thing. It's normal, right? Not like the oil and the extortion and the sex trafficking, but, like, you know, this is a rich, famous guy paying unimaginable amounts of money to all of these women. They should be grateful. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that could be the attitude of an even older lady, for example. And then that certainly is the attitude of a lot of the men in the jury. It's way, way, way more likely that the men in the jury are going to feel that way. They also brought up how much expensive stuff Diddy bought for them to say, oh, but he was giving them so much money. Exactly.
Kira, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. I'm not even sure if I would say there would be an appeal, because for Sean Combs and his defense team, this is a massive win. 3 of the counts that had a life sentence possibility are gone. When it comes to transportation to engage in prostitution,
from what I heard, and it's likely his defense team employed a rarely used tactic called "This Is Real," the Chewbacca defense, which is literally named after a South Park joke. This tactic is basically used to repeatedly ask questions that would be permissible under the rules of evidence, but are only being asked to confuse the jury and make them overthink things. That all being said, there are ways to get through the hostile jurors. It just takes skill and preparation, and the prosecutors fucked up. I'm just shocked because it's like the feds. That's it. Nah, for real, too many people have a what did you think would happen going to that party mentality. It's bogus, and the collective society is fried for so many countries. Yeah, this is one of the most prescient, long-standing parts of every country, like most countries' culture war issues, is like the gender war dynamic. It kind of goes away every couple of years, and because the state is woefully inept at prosecuting these kinds of things then there is like a decentralized effort to take matters into their own hands, like out of an understandable, genuine desire for justice. Women will sometimes take matters in their own hands. That's how the Me Too movement happened. And when that takes place, there's also like a pendulum swinging in the opposite direction as well. There's also opportunists like the Time's Up movement, people that literally work with Andrew Cuomo that like basically tried to use this this real, genuine concern as a means of like career advancement. But then the pendulum swings in the opposite direction. There's also people who are getting articles written about them that is seen as like a career death sentence, I guess, quote unquote. And then that is, and it's not over like any sort of serious violation, but instead is treated with the same severity. And then the cultural pendulum swings in the opposite direction. And then you have the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp stuff. And now we're officially in the post Me Too era. Where the pendulum is officially swung in the opposite direction and people are getting incredibly vicious, like with the Andrew Tates of the world, with the manosphere. People are getting incredibly vicious for perceived slights and are actively defending men across the board unconditionally without even like looking into it, without even addressing any of it. And it's like it's swung back into the previous standard that was in place already before the Me Too movement. Do you think they intentionally flubbed this so that any potential blackmail shit will stay hidden? No, I don't think P. Diddy's level of like sex party shit was actually being done in a similar fashion to Jeffrey Epstein. So no, I don't think that. Like, I don't think P. Diddy or Andrew Tate are like Jeffrey Epstein style sex traffickers. I don't think that they're playing the same role. I don't think that that's what's going on. It was, mate. Okay. It's similar as far as like crimes being committed. It's not similar as far as like what the goals were here. You can't compare. Jeffrey Epstein is like truly a unique figure as an asset for intelligence, for numerous intelligence communities, especially Mossad and the CIA. That I believe that Jeffrey Epstein was a sexual blackmail operation and a fixer of sorts as well. But a person that was like the glue for a lot of the societal elites down to like royalty. Okay, that is an entirely different standard that I don't even know if we'll ever find another version of that. I feel like you have a little sampling bias. Your job is mostly looking at reactionaries doing things like essay or worse apologists. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think normie discourse ain't tainted to that degree. No, I think normies have a really slanted opinion on this kind of stuff where they're just like, I don't really get it. Yeah, a rich guy was doing sex parties. It's weird. It's gross. But like these women were probably asking for it is probably the most common normie attitude on this stuff. Cassie is opposing Sean Diddy Combs' release from federal custody. Miss Ventura believes that Mr. Combs is likely to pose a danger to the victims who testified in the case, including herself, as well as to the community.
The minimum is nothing. There's a theoretical possibility that he walks out on probation. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, but the max is 10 years. Even if you were to take both sentences, and he's not going to get 10 years, they're going to look at his criminal history, mitigating circumstances, aggravating circumstances, and I would assume that he gets somewhere in the middle ground, maybe like 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years, possible through that sentencing range for each count. Sean Combs going to trial where he was facing life and being able to walk out with something under 10 years, well under 10 years possibly, that is a victory. Will he appeal? Sure, that's his right to do so, but I don't see an appeal here. I think you take this as a win, you serve the few years that you may get, and you be happy that you didn't get life. I'm somewhat shocked as to the trafficking for Cassie. I thought that might have been a stronger case for the government. I didn't think that they had the RICO, and I definitely didn't think they had the Jane trafficking. But this is, I think in only so many words, and I keep saying it, I think this is a positive result for Sean Combs and his team.
They're saying it's a victory for the defense, which is true, Chatter. He's not saying it's a victory for women. It's clearly not. What? Extortion doesn't need to be geopolitical to yield power. Mock it all you want, but think it through. Dude, I'm not saying he wasn't doing extortion and no, you're misunderstanding me. I'm simply stating that the Jeffrey Epstein sexual blackmail operation was infinitely more sophisticated than a rapist, perverted Hollywood sex trafficker. Okay, that's like the scope of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing is like far different than what Diddy was doing. They are on an entirely different plane of existence. And I was only saying this as a direct response to a chatter speculating that maybe they did a piss poor job of prosecuting him because he's an asset or something. And I'm saying I don't think that's the case. Like Harvey Weinstein would be more of an equivalent or closer equivalent in terms of power and magnitude, but like even then, I don't think it's like a blackmail operation. You're so bad at explaining your points. Wait, what? What did I? How? What? I don't know. I feel like chat gets it. Maybe you didn't.
I think there can be no mixing of words as to what Sean Combs is when it comes to the treatment of women. Full stop. There's no question as to what we saw in terms of the strength of the women who took the stand and testified about the abuse that happened to them. There's no question about the photos we saw of Cassie in terms of the bruising of her body, the bruising of her face, and the violence in that Intercontinental Hotel. There should be strength in the fact that those women were believed in terms of what they said. Putting my attorney cap hat back on for a moment, I think the difficulty of this and what may be perceived, and I hope it's a perception and not a reality, of the Me Too movement taking a step back based on this verdict, I think it comes from the overreaching of the government in this case, of trying to fit the allegations of this case into a RICO conspiracy, made it that much less palatable for the jury to take what they were saying to be true. And I think that might have also affected, in some way, shape, or form, the trafficking as well. I'll be honest, I'm somewhat shocked that they did not find Sean Combs guilty of trafficking Cassie because of the violence there. But I think that they made a mistake of not understanding the difference between a brutal domestic violence relationship in which Sean Combs participated in and was in many regards an aggressor of, if not the absolute aggressor of, and trafficking. And I think the overreach and misapplication of what 12 people in the Southern District of New York, or what society would believe to be trafficking in RICO, that misstep and misperception is what led the SDNY here. The SDNY has phenomenal prosecutors, has a phenomenal office, and their record speaks for itself. But I think in this case, they overestimated the strength of their case, and this is what happens when a jury speaks.
Yeah, Southern District in New York is one of the best prosecutorial teams in the country, if not the best. Like, they take out financial criminals. Like, they have an incredible track record. So this is also a major stain on that reputation. Is apparently Combs supporters were spraying baby oil on themselves, on each other outside the courthouse. Bro, I'm telling you, it's like we are so truly, as a society, like, this is so busted, brother. This is so messed up. This is insane, dude. It's like, this is the Boondocks episode playing itself out in real life. Like, this is the Boondocks R. Kelly episode in real time, dude. And it's like, it's partially, it's not because like they are big fans of Diddy. I think it's just clout too. It's like part insanity, part clout, part misogyny tourists, you know? Chill Hassan, but yes. I mean, that's what it is. Why would you do that? Why would you publicly do this? Why would you publicly do this? Especially a case such as this one. Why would you do this? Because you're mentally ill, you want clout, you're clout obsessed, and you probably don't give a shit about women in general, okay? That's the only reason why you would do this. You have no sense of shame, like no sense of self-preservation, what this looks like. I think people were always this crazy and this stupid. It's just now there is an incentive for people to be this crazy and this stupid in broad daylight because they get attention out of it. Do you understand? There is a very distorted incentive structure that exists now for people to behave in this like shameless capacity. There are movements that you can get behind. There is a lot of momentum in this direction, gender wars being one of them. And that's how you arrive at this insanity. Didn't this guy have like an industrial supply of baby oil in his house? Like, I feel like that alone is sus enough. Is he still looking at several years in prison? Yes, but like if all the charges kicked in, he was spending the rest of his life in jail. Now it's like, I think it's like 10 years, but the defense will go for 5. Yeah, 10 years max. So 20 years maximum sentence. And we don't even know if it's like going to be added on to one another. So it's 20 years or even 10 max. So it's like side by side sentencing. And then you can try and lower that with a decent defense team down to 5. And then you get out in 2 on good behavior. That is also, if you don't factor in, and I mean this with all sincerity, a Trump pardon. That's not even a joke. Like there is also a possibility of a Trump pardon. I could totally see that. He will be like, Diddy has been a great friend. He's been prosecuted unjustifiably by woke DAs that are also coming after me in the Southern District of New York. They came after me too, just like they came after Diddy. They came after Diddy because he's a good friend of mine. I can see that. Trump also does love dropping these like little bombs, these little like distraction bombs, as I like to call it. I could totally see him doing some shit like this as a distraction. That is the type of shit. That is the type of shit that he would use as a distraction for sure. He's very good at that sort of stuff. Will Trump pardon Diddy after the guilty verdict, and can he? The answer is yes.